and betterment of our community. I would like to start this afternoon by acknowledging the traditional custodians and lawmakers of this land, their elders, past and present, and welcome any descendants who are online today. I would like to advise that this council meeting will be held by video conference and recorded and live streamed, with the exception of confidential matters. This includes the public participation sections of meetings. The live stream recording of this afternoon's meeting will be available on the website as soon as practical. By participating in open council meetings, individuals consent to the use and disclosure of the information they share at the meeting, including any personal and/or sensitive information. Please note that it is an offence to make an unauthorised recording of the meeting. Okay, I'll note there are nil absences. Okay, moving on to question time. Colac Otway Shire encourages community input, and integral to this is the opportunity provided to ask questions at council meetings. A maximum of 30 minutes is allowed for question time. Community members wishing to ask questions of council by video conference were requested to register their intention to do so before 5 p.m. on Monday the 25th of July 2022. We received a request from Mr. Pravakati. I have received questions in writing from James Judd, Andy Coffey, Jeff Cook, Len Russell, Nasser Cobb and Pravakati. Questions received will be read out and a response will be provided by the relevant member of the Executive Management. Okay, we'll move on to questions received in writing. Question 1 from Mr. James Judd. When is the Colac Otway Shire Council going to find the money and carry out the big road and bridge works on Pollock Street, Chapel Street in Colac to make certain the land sold by Council in Bruce Street will not remain at risk of being isolated from the Colac Township as often as multiple times in any year? Unless this risk is removed, you are doing nothing to lessen the housing shortage in Colac. You cannot isolate people in areas they are unable to go to workplaces, schools or access required service from. Response from General Manager, Infrastructure and Operations.
Through the Mayor, Bruce Street site is accessible via a number of routes, including the Princess Hall. Therefore, this land has good access and is not dependent on any trade on.
Lost.
Yep. Okay, question 2. Other than all staff expenses and blue water deficit expenses in the 2022-2023 financial year, what percentage of total other outlays by the Colac Otway Shire Council is to be raised by rates and charges plus charges by Council for services rendered, plus what percentage of expenses is covered by all government grants already received or you expect to receive during this financial year? Response from Acting General Manager, Corporate Services.
Thanks, Mayor Hanson. Because this question seeks information that crosses 2 financial years, and I'm specifically referring to the government grants element, and we are yet to finalise the end of the year financial position, we are unable to provide the detail requested at this time, and therefore we'll need to take this question on notice and provide a response later.
Thank you. Question 3. Of the money received in advance by the Colac Otway Shire Council from government sources to date in 2021-2022, how much of these funds is subject to being returned in full, if not used for a purpose provided for or by a specific date, or if a government changes? Council is great at claiming it had money when it was only to come if a future event went a certain way. This included multi-millions of dollars with no certainty the present government will permit these allocations. Response from Acting General Manager, Corporate Services.
Thanks, Mayor Hanson. All grant funds received by the Colac Otway Shire Council are being expended consistent with the funding agreements with other tiers of government. Funding agreements do provide the means for local councils to request a variation to a funding agreement if the need arises. The recently elected federal Labor government has not communicated any request to return grant funds or change funding conditions.
Thank you. Okay, questions from Mr. Andy Coffey, Marengo. I'm a long-time resident and ratepayer with concern about our local community's faith in governance, especially local governance. The quickest way to undermine that faith or reinforce a lack of faith is through lack of transparency. We in Apollo Bay and surrounds already have a lack of faith in COS, as seen in the recent community satisfaction survey. Lack of transparency is also the primary tool of vested interest and ultimately corrupt government. So I noted with concern in the previous month, Council voted in a closed Council meeting to allocate the 2.6 million proceeds from the sale of its Bruce Street land to projects in Colac and surrounds. What else is the community to think that Council has had something to hide? My questions are as follows. Question 1, given that Council's public transparency policy states that the decision-making processes that it adopts are transparent and open to the community, can Council please explain why then this seemingly non-confidential matter of allocating the Bruce Street sale proceeds was debated and decided in a closed Council meeting? Response from General Manager, Governance and Communications.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Coffey. The matter of the sale of 36 to 52 Bruce Street, Colac was considered in confidential session pursuant to the provisions of 66 of the Local Government Act, as detailed in the 4th of May 2022 resolution, which has now been released in full. Council has resolved to sell the land but not yet determined how the income will be allocated. Council will receive a report at a future meeting to determine that matter at a meeting open to the public.
Question 2. Well, the same policy also states if decisions have already been made, it is important that we inform the community of the reasons why the decision was made. So can Council please inform the community, especially those communities outside Colac and surrounds, the reasons why Council decided to allocate the Bruce Street sale proceeds to Colac and surrounds? Response from General Manager, Governance and Communications.
Through you, Mayor. As per my response to the previous question, Council has not resolved to allocate the Bruce Street sale proceeds to Colac and surrounds. Council has effectively asked for a report that outlines projects or initiatives for Colac and surrounds, but has not predetermined a decision or limited its options by doing this. The report will be presented at a public meeting before the end of February 2023, which will give the community visibility of the report, the debate and the decision on this matter.
Question 3, can Council provide its definition of Colac and surrounds? Response from Manager, Governance and Communications.
Through you, Mayor. Council didn't define Colac and surrounds for the purposes of the future report. This will be agreed through discussion with councillors and included in the report to ensure readers are provided clear understanding of the scope.
Oh, thank you. Questions from Mr. Jeff Cook, Colac. At the April 2021 Council meeting, officers presented a report quoting a cost of some $150,000 to replace the gas boilers that heat the pools at the Blue Water Centre with electric heat pumps. This report was accepted and councillors voted unanimously to agree with replacing the boilers. But the motion was then rescinded at a briefing to councillors where a feasibility study was noted to have shown that the cost of electrification at the centre was $3.1 million. In the interest of transparency, can Council please make this $20,000 feasibility study available to the public so that a true comparison can be made of the options to reduce gas usage at Blue Water? Response from Manager, Governance and Communications.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Cook. The high-efficiency gas boilers were installed as part of the Blue Water redevelopment in 2015-16, and they still have 5 to 10 years of useful operational life before they will be due for replacement. The heat pumps are a separate project. At the April 2021 meeting, Council resolved to allocate $80,000 additional funding in its 2021-22 Council budget to install electrified heat pumps for the 3 pools at Blue Water Leisure Centre. The feasibility of the heat pump electrification was explored and found to be significantly more complex and costly than previously envisaged, and cannot be achieved through direct replacement of the pumps, as it requires major upgrade to the electrical supply and a larger building footprint encroaching on education land. The complexities and financial implications were presented to councillors at a briefing session in March 2022 to explain that the project as intended was not viable and could not proceed. This does not represent a rescission of the earlier decision. I think councillors, like the community, were disappointed that the project could not be achieved, but recognised that it was not possible without multi-million-dollar commitment, which cannot be made at this time. In the interests of public transparency, the feasibility study will be assessed in accordance with Council's public transparency policy and a determination made following consultation with the appropriate parties.
Thank you. Okay, questions from Lynn Russell Colac. Members of the community have expressed to me concern at the number of job advertisements for positions and the apparent staff changes at the Colac Otway Shire. They have expressed concern because each staff change cost the council in loss of local knowledge, new employee costs including training, orientation, as well as the costs incurred when a staff member leaves or is made redundant. Could you please answer the questions? Why is this happening? Is it part of a restructure, staff dissatisfaction, or a management issue? Job advertised recently include Blue Water, school team leader, customer relations team leader, gym instructor, programs team leader, customer relations assistant, lifeguard centre manager, CosWorks, multi-purpose parks and gardens officer, local laws, multi-purpose officer roads, COPAC, front of house and admin officer, and other admin relief staff, risk and insurance officer, workplace health and safety business partner. I would appreciate an explanation answer so I can pass it on to those who have contacted me and look forward to hearing the answer at the next council meeting when I zoom in. Response from Acting General Manager Corporate Services. I think you was answering that. Sorry. I can't hear it. Everybody here? Oh, thank you. Sorry, Lynn.
Thanks, Mayor Hanson, and thanks, Lynn Russell, for the question. Just some background. According to the ABS, or the Australian Bureau of Statistics, 9.5% of employed people changed jobs during the year ending February 2022, being the highest annual job mobility rate since 2012. While Colac Otway Shire's turnover of 19.59% of effective full-time staff for the financial year to June 2022 is higher than the Victorian mobility rate of 10.1% in February, Colac Otway Shire has been successful in attracting strong candidates for our advertised roles and certainly welcomes new skills, experience and qualifications into our organisation. The majority of vacancies at Colac Otway Shire have been created through natural attrition, being retirements and employees taking advantage of the tight labour market that is providing various job and career advancement opportunities. Employees are re-evaluating their working arrangements and making adjustments following the changing employment landscape as a result of the pandemic. We are seeing people wanting to work closer to home and a lot more remote working arrangements. New positions have been created as a result of an organisation restructure and response to our workforce plan, which outlines council strategies to attract and retain employees. Council does collect feedback from all exiting employees, as well as regular engagement surveys to understand the engagement of our workforce, as well as any trends for departing employees. All feedback is analysed and implemented into our culture and workforce planning processes. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, questions from Mr. Nasser-Cobb. I submitted questions to June 2022 council meeting that the council officers chose to ignore, answering many of them. This bad practice reflects the culture of opaqueness prevailing among council officers, which is likely to be due to lack of accountability. No wonder the community is highly dissatisfied with council performance, according to the latest survey. The council is obliged to answer, not merely respond with a few words such as noted. Questions from members of the public, truthfully and factually. The habit of council officers providing a political narrative unsupported by facts could reflect incompetence of officers unaware of the facts and figures, as well as maladministration of the executive team signing off on these poorly constructed responses. However, this is the second chance for the council to behave transparently. Kindly answer each sub-question with facts and figures. Mr. Cobb submitted 15 questions to the 29th of June council meeting. Due to the large number of public questions received for the June 22 council meeting, we generally only got to 2 questions per submitter. And I do try and sort of spread it out so everybody gets their chance, and also including people that are in the gallery. Unfortunately, Mr. Cobb's 2 questions were not able to be answered on the night and were taken on notice. We will provide a response to those 2 questions shortly. Mr. Cobb received written responses on the 19th of July for the remaining 13 questions in accordance with our governance rules. Mr. Cobb has resubmitted 11 of the 13 questions that we have already answered in writing, and I don't intend to read a response to those again in this forum. We will now address his 2 outstanding questions. In Forest, the 2018 audit had the number of unknown septic systems at 34%, and the high risk was 39 out of 113 properties audited. In 2021, Domestic Wastewater Management Plan lists the number of unknown septic systems as 69 out of 149, 46%. 1A, would the council be honest and transparent and publish the progress of attending to their statutory responsibility regarding wastewater in the Shire, with numbers comparing 2015 and 2022 for the categories of unknown, high risk and EPA compliant? Response from General Manager, Infrastructure and Operations.
Thank you, Mayor Hanson, and thank you, Mr. Cobb, for the question. Council is meeting its statutory responsibilities in relation to the assessment, permit and approval process for domestic on-site wastewater systems. Since November 2015, Council has issued 184 permits up until the 25th of the 7th, 2022. Systems installed post 1st of July 2016 upon approval would have been EPA compliant, and a calendar year breakdown of permits will be made available on Council's website in the coming days. Thank you.
Thank you. 1B, the council stated council has responded to a number of individual sites within Forest since 2017 where the impacts of off-site discharge were directly impacting other properties owners. How many sites did the council attend and how many were resolved? Numbers, please. Response from General Manager, Infrastructure and Operations.
So, as correctly identified, 39 systems from the 2017 audits in Forest were categorised as high risk based on the risk ranking criteria at the time. Then in 2018, 28 additional inspections were completed in Forest, 20 follow-up inspections and 8 new inspections. The recommendations from the audit completed in 2017 and 2018 audits were to defer any short and medium-term improvement strategy, education and compliance and enforcement. Education is the preferred option. However, it is unclear how many properties in total received formal education letters and follow-ups. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to questions from Mr. Pravakati. Question 1. Information revealed at the Council meeting in June 2022 confirms that the decision to allocate the proceeds of its land sale exclusively to Colac and surrounds was biased, divisive and not in the best interest of the entire municipal community. It was achieved through an amended motion that should never have been presented and agreed to. Will Council now publicly give a commitment to ensure a fair and objective process to allocate the proceeds of the land sale to projects that are in most need of the funds, no matter where they may be allocated within the Shire? If not, will Council please reveal which townships in the Shire will not be eligible to benefit from these funds? Response from Manager, Governance and Communications, Marlo Emmett.
Thank you for the question, Mr. Cutty. As per my earlier response to a previous question, Council has not resolved to allocate the Bruce Street sale proceeds to Colac and surrounds. Council has effectively asked for a report that outlines projects or initiatives for Colac and surrounds, but has not limited its options by doing this. The report will be presented at a public meeting before the end of February 2023, which will give the community visibility of the report, the debate and the decision on this matter.
Thank you.
Mayor Hanson, if I may just respond to that, please, and I seek a clarification.
No, Mr. Cuddy, just wait until I've gone to questions from the gallery, please.
Okay.
Okay, and you did jump in. I was just about to go to questions from the gallery because I know you've registered, so I did know you were there. Mr. Cuddy, do you have any questions?
Hello?
We can hear you.
All right, okay. The clarification I was going to seek was this. In that earlier question that the officer responded to, there was an indication that what exactly constitutes Colac and surrounds will be determined at a future council meeting. Am I correct? Hello?
Sorry, I believe the response to that question was?
Sorry.
That Council didn't define Colac and surrounds for the purpose of the future report. This will be agreed through discussion with councillors and included in the report to ensure readers are provided clear understanding of the scope.
Yes, but what I'm trying to say is the moment, what it should be is Colac, it will be determined in Colac Shire. Once you say that we're going to determine Colac and surround, what exactly that constitutes Colac and surround, then you're automatically confining it to a region. So at some stage you're going to decide what Colac and surrounds is. And that then confines it to a region. What I'm saying is, what is the reason, what is the need to say Colac and surrounds rather than give it to the projects that are most in need? Now, it may well be that they will all come into Colac, that all the projects that they may be in Colac because you've determined based on the needs that that's where it should be, and then so be it. But what I'm saying is that once you say that we are going to give it to Colac and surrounds and we're going to determine what is Colac and surrounds, you've automatically said that there's going to be a certain portion of a shire that will not be considered to even prepare the report, even though they might have projects that are of urgent need.
I think I might ask the CEO to respond to that one.
I'm sorry, Mayor Hanson, I actually am having difficulty hearing the question, so I didn't capture all of that question.
Okay, essentially I'm saying that the decision, that there is going to be a decision as to what constitutes Colac and surrounds. Based on that decision by councillors, the report is going to be prepared. So when the report is being prepared, it will take into consideration only those places that come under Colac and surrounds as determined by councillors. What I'm saying is that that in itself is already, you've decided that there is going to be a place called Colac and surrounds who are only going to get the benefit of this, instead of basing it on the projects most in need, wherever they may be located in the Shire. So, and it may well be that all the projects that are most important are in Colac and whatever you might call it surrounds. So, what I'm trying to point out is that there you have actually decided that there's going to be only a confined region, and I'm saying that what it should be is wherever the most need is in the Shire, in the whole Shire, not just in a region to be determined, whether it's determined now or later. The very process by which it was done in the original meeting goes to show that there was an intention to give it to a region which was primarily Colac with some others. So
Okay.
what I'm trying to say,
What's the question?
What's the question?
the question is, why aren't you determining it based on the projects of need, the most need in the entire Shire? Why do you have to go through the process of trying to work out Colac and surrounds? You don't need to go through that process. Just
Okay,
saying.
just a chance to answer the question. CEO?
So through Mayor Hanson, so thank you, Mr. Carney, for drawing that to a question. I think what you are asking, however, is the reasoning for a decision that was made on the 4th of May, and that is not something that as the CEO I'm in a position to actually make comment on.
No,
That's my answer.
I'm not asking from the 4th of May. I'm actually asking based on information I received from the last council meeting.
Mr. Carney, you're
June.
referring
So
to a
it's not part of the
decision that was made
confidential.
on the 4th of May, and you're asking why, and all I'm saying is that that is not a matter for me to comment on. Thank you.
So it is still going to be Colac and surrounds.
I think, Mr. Cuddy, there is a report asked, that's all, not determine where the funds are going. The funds can go anywhere. All that was asked for was a report. Anywhere. The funds could go anywhere, but there has been a request for a report.
Okay, so if it's going anywhere, why the need for Colac and surrounds?
Mr. Cuddy, this is a council meeting and we're not here for debate. So I think your question has been answered and there might be a bit of misunderstanding, but unless you've got another question, do you have another question?
Prabha Kuti
is now exiting.
Okay, all right. If there's no other questions, then we might leave it there. So I'll note that we haven't received any petitions or joint letters, and are there any declarations of interest? No declarations of interest. I now propose that we move to confirm the minutes from the council meeting held on the 29th of June 2022. Do I have a mover for the minutes? Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. I have an alternative which seeks to correct another of matters in the minutes. I think the officers have a copy of that. I think it would be helpful if not only the alternative was put on the screen, but the actual minutes were able to be put on the screen as they have been distributed to councillors, if that's possible. And I note that the officer interpretation of my wording is 95% correct, but it includes words that I don't agree with. So I've emailed that to you. I've emailed that to governance.
Okay. We might just wait a moment while we get that up on the screen, which might take a couple of minutes. That's all right. You could probably have a short, grab a cup of tea if you need to while this is just being is being typed out.
Not wanting to upset the flow of the meeting, could they copy the email and dump it in in the document? Although I wouldn't want to be criticised for suggesting how people should do their jobs. It's just a question.
Yeah, I'll just check. Otherwise, I think if anybody needs a quick toilet break or whatever, now's the time to do it. Okay, Councillor Hart, it can't be done because of the live streaming. It would upset the whatever. I've just had that advice from IT, so it might take a couple of minutes. So if you do need to duck out, now is the time.
I might just point out that these are the words that have been typed at the moment. So that's first point. Noting that this is inconsistent with Council's governance rules. That's another debate for another day, and they're not my words. And I'm moving this without the words, noting that this is inconsistent with Council's governance rules. So when they could perhaps find the delete button.
Kate, there are a number of people who seem to be frozen on the screen. I'm just wondering how it's going for everyone else.
I can only see 4 people anyway, Graham.
Yeah. Good. Kate and Marg are frozen on my screen.
Yeah, same here.
I think that's because they've got their cameras turned off and they've gone to have a short break. It happens when you turn your camera off.
Well, thanks, Councillor. Well, I might have one too. Please don't start without me.
Okay. All right, is this the, okay, councillors, I think we're all back. Is this the motion, Councillor Hart?
It's pretty close. The last line of point 4 has a quotation mark when it should just be a full stop. By that stage, it's not a quotation mark. The quotation mark ends earlier after the 2 words serve basis. So I'll just have a look at it if you may, Mayor.
Can everyone see it?
Yes, I can.
Yeah, it's on the screen, Jamie. You can just expand it out using the 2-finger method.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah, it's just not appearing on my screen. I can see
Okay.
where it's meant to be. Yeah.
Councillor Potter.
Well, thanks, Mayor. Just points 2 and 3, they refer to, oh yeah, sorry, I'm not reading it right. Withdraw that. Thanks, Mayor.
There is a problem there where it refers.
Okay, just remember this is a council meeting. Can you just put your hand up rather than just talk? We've just got to remember we're in a council meeting, not a briefing or a chat. Okay, Councillor Hart, you're the mover of this motion. Are you comfortable with this motion as it appears?
Yep, happy to answer any questions.
Okay. Is there a seconder for this motion? Councillor Costin, is it to be opposed? No. Okay. Well, as it's the minutes, does anybody want to talk on the minutes, or let's put it to a vote?
Well,
It's not
opposed, Mayor, if it's not opposed, I'm happy to not talk. But if someone's going to vote against it, then I should be allowed to have the right to talk.
I don't think anybody's opposed. Is anybody opposed? No. All right, councillors, I'll call for a vote. All those in favour?
Mayor, if it's not a unanimous vote, I should be allowed to speak to it. We shouldn't be able to have this people saying they don't oppose and then vote against it.
I can't see what's happening here. Councillor Bell, you've got your hand up.
Sorry, I'm just tried to get in before you went to that vote, but I can't see the screen, so I'm in a bit of a difficult spot here. I can't see what's currently in front of us. So I just want to raise that. Whether or not perhaps it could be emailed to me.
I've done that, Councillor Bell. I've emailed it to you just now.
Is it up to date? Is it? Oh, you have. Okay. And it's as it appears on the screen that you're referring to.
The only difference, I removed the point in point 1 that you may have heard me say that about the claim that it's inconsistent with the governance rules. But I emailed that to you probably just a minute ago or so.
Okay, Councillor Potter.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Look, whilst no one said they were going to formally oppose it, I understand Councillor Hart's point in relation to if it is going to be opposed, then he has a right to speak to it. I'm not sure what the rules say about that, but I do take his point on that.
No, that's fine. So, Councillor Hart, you're the mover.
Thanks, Mayor. I think the minutes should reflect what actually happened at the council meeting. The first point deals with a number of questions that you read out in the June meeting, similar to what you've done today in today's meeting, and you read out pre-prepared answers. I think that if you're going to have questions and answers in the minutes, that it should reflect the actual answers, not something that someone has summarised or reinterpreted at a later time. So the first point, I'm hoping that you're able to hear me okay, Mayor, is dealing with minutes reflecting the actual answers that you read out at the meeting that have already been prepared rather than someone else reinterpreting those answers later. Point 2 and 3 relates to a very important matter, which is the declaration of interest. There's some typos on page 12 and 27 in the draft minutes that were circulated that refer to Councillor Graham Potterer with 2 R's, which is obviously a mistake. It needs to be corrected, and we need to have some understanding that if there's ever anything looked into in terms of conflict of interest, it needs to be crystal clear who declared the interest, and there's some relatively minor mistakes that can be corrected on page 12 and 27. Page 40 is part of the response to item 10.6, the Colac Otway Shire Grant Program. This also has some relevance to the declaration of a conflict of interest. We dealt with various parts of that matter as separate standalone resolutions. And that's something we've done many, many years, over the last 10 years or more, that you might have councillors have a conflict with one particular part, or you might split a motion, as you allowed to happen with this last meeting. So the part where those are recorded as separate motions is correct. However, from page 40, there is then an attempt to reconsolidate a whole lot of motions to do with the community grants. That doesn't reflect what happened at the meeting. There was no reconsolidation. Sometimes we do consolidate motions and it's reflected in the minutes. And I think that it needs to be accurate, reflect what happened, again, similar to point 1, similar to point 2, similar to point 3. The risk if you restate it in the way it's been restated from page 40 could give a misleading impression that we voted on a consolidated resolution, which we didn't on this particular item. And given the conflict of interest, I think it's poor practice anyway to say the motion was consolidated when it wasn't. But given the conflict of interest, that adds a new element to it, and we shouldn't be confusing the minutes in that way. You never know when the minutes are going to become important. You never know when there's going to be a municipal inspector investigation. The only opportunity we have to correct the minutes is today, and all the 4 things I have suggested are more accurately reflecting what occurred at the council meeting.
Thank you, Councillor Costin. You're the seconder.
Thank you, Mayor. Councillor Hart's correct. It's important we get these minutes right, particularly in relation to conflict of interest. These minutes could become legal documents. They could end up in court, and it's going to be very difficult to argue that the minutes don't reflect what actually happened in the council meeting. So we need to be sure we get them right at this stage. A lawyer will interpret them, what's in black and white, what the words are in the minutes. So that we need to make sure that they are accurate and they are correct. Thank you.
Councillor Potter, you're opposed.
Thanks, Mayor. Didn't know that I formally opposed, but yeah, look, I will speak to this. I was of a mind to support this, but I'm conscious of the way our governance rules read at the moment, and I think the minutes were prepared in accordance with those government rules, which highlights a problem or an issue that I think councillors need to sit around the table and thrash out again. The rules are new, and we're operating in a different environment to the one that we had in the past. And I'm hopeful later on in this meeting, to move a motion which to allow us time to consider the governance rules and tease out the points, valid points, I think, in my mind, that Councillor Hart has raised, so that we can tidy all this up down the track.
Does any other councillor wish to speak? Okay. Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour?
Right to reply, please.
Sorry, Councillor Hart, I didn't give you a right of reply.
But thank you, Mayor. I foreshadow that if this gets lost, I'll move another alternative which seeks to do the corrections. Councillor Potter hasn't indicated which clause, whether it's all four or one of them that gives him trouble. I'm going to take a guess it might be number one. But I really urge is that there's a risk here if we vote against this, that you're going to have in different parts that Councillor Graham Potterer with two R's declared conflicts of interest and didn't leave the room. It's clearly a mistake, but it could be two mistakes. It could be that it's Councillor Graham Costin, which is what it should be, or it could be that it's Councillor Chris Potter. So I foreshadow that if I'm going to have another attempt if this is voted down to try to correct 2, 3 and 4, but I think the quickest way would be to just pass this resolution as it is.
Yeah, thank you. Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? All those against? Okay, the motion is lost 3-4.
Okay, division.
Division is called. All those in favour? Councillor Bell, Councillor Hart, Councillor Costa, all those against? Councillor Potter, Councillor White, Councillor McCracken, Councillor Hanson. Councillor Hart, you...
I'll have another go if I may, Mayor,
yep.
Which would be deleting 1, 2 would become 1, 3 would become 2, and 4 would become 3.
Okay, thank you. All right, I think we can move on as the admin catches up. Is there a seconder for that motion? Councillor Costin, is it to be opposed? No. It appears no opposition to this motion. Councillor Hart, we might go straight to the vote if that's suitable.
I'm happy for you to try a vote, but if anyone opposes it, I would reserve my right to speak.
I have asked for anyone who opposes it, doesn't appear. Okay, councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? Okay, the item's carried 7-0. Thank you. Okay, now we move to the community awards. To item 9.1, the Community Awards Review. The purpose of this report is for Council to consider a review of the 2022 Colac Otway Community Awards and associated event. Do councillors have any questions of officers? No. If there's no questions, then councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation for the report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? Is that you, Councillor White? Sorry. Oh, Councillor McCracken as the mover, Councillor White as the seconder.
I was just going to say I'm happy to move the motion that's in front of us, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor White as the seconder. Is it to be opposed? Right. Okay, Councillor McCracken as the mover.
Thanks, Mayor. I won't talk for too long on this. It's pretty straightforward. These are the 3 categories. I'll just make the point that it doesn't limit us from awarding multiple awards in each award category if council so desires. So hopefully we see a lot of good applications for these awards and, council can consider them at the appropriate time. It should be really exciting. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor White as the seconder.
Just to say thank you for the officers for their review report and bringing it to council, making it clear where we're at and that it was a success last year, and I think it's great that we'll go forward with it this year.
Thank you. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you to the officers for preparing this report. Good report, thank you. Last year we had about 13 or 14 nominations for the Community Service Award, and it was a very difficult choice. There are many worthy candidates for that award, both individuals and businesses. And there are some fantastic contributions to the community that I read about in the report. So I fully support this proposal, and especially pleased to see that if we can consider more than one awardee for the community service category. And I think that's a good thing, because it's very difficult to choose one over another, and we found that last year. I'd also encourage those in our community to have a look around and think about those who'd like to nominate for one of these 3 awards. Thank you.
Thank you. Does any other councillor wish to speak? No. Okay, councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? Okay, the item's carried 7-0. Now we move to item 9.2, the City Reserves Planning Project. The purpose of this report is to present the Colac City Reserves Planning Project draft report, inclusive of draft master plans for Eastern Reserve, Western Reserve, Lake Oval, to the Colac Cricket Ground, and Central Reserve. The Council's consideration to release on public exhibition, seeking feedback from the community for 6 weeks from the 1st of August 2022 to the 11th of September 2022. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Costin.
Thank you, Mayor. 2 questions. The first one is I'm just wondering whether we've looked at the life cycle costs of these projects that proposed total up to 33 million. That's the first question. Second question relates to the many other sports reserves we have around the Shire. And I'm wondering if those, as we progress our master planning for those other reserves, whether they'll be included in the principles-based planning framework and the overall ranking that we see on page 31 of the report.
Okay, I can't really see everyone on the screen, so I might ask Mr. Surin to answer that, or you can allocate one, Mr. Surin.
No worries. Thanks, Mayor, and through you, thanks for the questions, Councillor Costin. Firstly, the cost estimates in the draft master plans are quite high level. At this stage, they don't necessarily consider full life cycle costs, but we certainly have taken into consideration asset renewal versus complete new assets, and that's been built into the principles-based planning framework. In terms of your second question, further to that, if Council supports these master plans to be put on public exhibition, we can do some further work on those life cycle costs and bring that back to Council. In regards to your second question, yes, we do have a number of other master plans. We've got, obviously more than 4 recreation reserves right across the Shire. So what we would do once these master plans have been finalised, we would collate actions from other master plans and include those in the principles-based planning framework to understand what our priorities are across the whole Shire.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? I got everyone here yet. Okay, if there's no further questions, councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with the report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? Councillor Potter is the mover. Is there a seconder? Councillor Costin. Okay, is it to be opposed? No. Councillor Potter is the mover.
Thanks, Mayor. I won't talk too long on this topic today because we'll see it again, but this motion that I'm moving, which is the recommendation on the screen, it just acknowledges the report and puts it out, if it's supported, puts it out for public consultation. It's a very, very high level report. It summarises the conditions of Colac based sporting reserves and also looks at what's required to cater for the growth that Colac population is expected to undergo over the next few years, with a expected population growth to 20,000 people. There's mention of a figure in the report of total cost of $33 million or thereabouts. Clearly, we don't have $33 million. I note that Apollo Bay Footy Netball Club are seeking their share of that amount, and I know they need work down there, as does Birregurra. I think they're looking for a couple of $1 million. Eliminate South Colac, they need a substantial amount of money to upgrade their facilities, and of course there's a woeful facilities out at Western Eagles that needs a lot of money spent on them as well, and I'm sure Otway Footy Netball Club would like to see some money spent on their reserves. This report's not focusing on those precincts, which, as we've heard from Mr. Surin, will get their own master plans. But this report looks at the conditions of Colac facilities for now, what's needed in the future. There's been an extensive consultation with the sporting groups and user groups. It's a very, very detailed report. I encourage everyone to have a look at it, and no doubt councils will have a further discussion about this, and then look at priorities moving into the future. One of the facts of life is, if we're applying for government grants, because we won't be able to fund this, we have to have precinct plans behind us to back up our applications to satisfy the criteria of government. So that's a reason why we need to undergo these processes. So I encourage everyone to have a look at it. Yeah, that'll do, Mayor. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Costin is the seconder.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to reinforce Councillor Potter's words and to thank the officers involved in preparing these master plans. I thought they were really well done and done to a high standard. They might be high level, but they're done to a high standard. And as Councillor Potter just pointed out, we need these sort of plans to guide our future investments and to underpin any grant applications. It doesn't come cheap. I mean, these master plans have cost about $20,000 per reserve. And if we look at the investment proposed of $33 million, if we include the Illuminate Recreation Reserve, we're talking about around $5,670 for every household in Colac and Illuminate to implement all these. It's certainly beyond our capacity to pay. It's beyond the capacity of our local sports and infrastructure grant funding. So we will need to use these plans to lobby for additional funding. But the financial impact doesn't stop there, because we also need to look at the future costs of these investments. And if I have one criticism of these master plans, it is that it doesn't look closely enough at the life cycle costs of the proposed investments. And I think, just like roads and bridges, this is essential that we understand what the future costs are. We can't keep funding bigger and better sports reserves in Colac without considering these associated future costs. So I'm a little uncomfortable that the prioritisation approach on page 28 puts only a 15% weighting on the impact on our long-term finances. I think we need to look a little bit more at those weightings and perhaps get councillors involved in setting those weightings. We also need to consider the other sports reserves outside the Colac area, and probably the next biggest sports ground in the Shire is the Apollo Bay Recreation Reserve that serves around 3,000 people. And as Councillor Potter noted, a master plan is currently being prepared for this reserve, and I look forward to a similar standard of master plan for the Apollo Bay Rec Reserve. And I also look forward to see, as master plans are completed for all other reserves, that they get included in the overall ranking framework, which is shown on page 31, so that we can see the relative priority needs across all our sports reserves in the future. But this is a great start. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. I note that this particular document is going out for comment, and will support this resolution. I do have concerns about the lack of focus on other areas, but at the same time, I note the comments by Mr. Surin and Councillor Potter on other work that's been done in relation to that. I think the point that Councillor Costin has made about life cycle costs is a very important point, and too often council has been happy to grab funds for a grant to build a particular facility with no understanding of the long-term costs of that in terms of maintenance and operations. And it's a point that this council needs to tease out when they're considering this sort of expenditure.
Thank you, Councillor Hart. Does any other councillor wish to speak? No? Okay, councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion in relation to this matter? I think everybody has frozen, so if you could just call out, that would be handy.
Mayor, but I think Councillor Potter moved it.
Yeah.
Oh,
Councillor Hart.
sorry, I've got confused because I can't see everyone. I'm now, sorry, I'll call for a vote. I have got confused because you've all frozen, so I've been trying to deal with that. No, we'll now call for a vote. All those in favour, but I probably won't be able to see. Oh, got it now. Okay, thank you. Okay, the item's carried 7-0. The joys of technology. Okay, now we move to item 10.3, the Lake Colac Caravan Park Expression of Interest. The purpose of this report is for Council to consider releasing an expression of interest, EOI, for the lease of the Lake Colac Caravan Park. Councillor Hart, you have a question.
Yes, more of a comment, Mayor, that I've got an alternative which just, in my opinion, tightens up the resolution a little bit.
Okay, is that the one that's up on the screen? No. And we've got.
I thought it had some red, Mayor, so we could be quite clear what the changes were as the red ink disappeared.
I think it might have. Councillor Hart, can you remember what those changes were?
I'm up to point 6.
Yeah.
It looks all right to point 6. If you'll just indulge me for a minute, Mayor.
I think I'll have them. So I think. Yeah, okay.
I think it's okay, Mayor.
Okay, and Councillor White just has a question as well. So I'll ask Councillor White if she has a question.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, I was just interested when we had a briefing about the lease, there was some discussion about whether or not the terms might be extended beyond the end of January if there was any barriers for preferred leasees to take it on, that they may have required a bit longer, and that I think has disappeared. Just wondering if someone could comment on that, please.
Okay, I might ask. I'll ask Mr. Surin to respond, but you might.
Yeah.
You might.
Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you.
Yeah, through you. Yeah, we have had some conversations with or attempted to have conversations with the current lessee. I might ask Mr. Myatt just to provide an update on where that's at.
Yes, thanks, Ian. Through the Mayor, we're at a point where we're in very initial conversations and believe that there is an opportunity to, if we think an extension is required or is preferable, to come to a future council meeting over the next couple of months in discussion with the current tenant and any future tenants, if that does look like a preferable option. So we don't believe it needs to be included in the resolution at this point in time.
Okay. So we've still got the flexibility if we need it.
Yes, that's correct.
Thanks.
All right, excellent, thank you. Are there any other questions from councillors before we consider Councillor Hart's motion? No, okay, so Councillor Hart, that's your motion up there. Is there a seconder for Councillor Hart's motion? Councillor Austin. Sorry, Councillor Watt, have you got a question?
I'm just wondering whether Councillor Hart can just run us through his changes before we second it or whatever.
Yeah. I think I have got them here, Councillor Hart, if you don't have them.
I'm happy, particularly if you've got some red ink that sort of highlights them there. And obviously I'll speak to it if I get that opportunity.
So I think the changes were started in point 3, where you have added in from the 29th of July 2022 to the 29th of September 2022. Yep. Yep. And then point 4 is also an addition. As well. Yep, and then I think down at point 7.
I think point 5 also adds a bit there.
I don't know whether it does. I've got to have, hang on, I'll compare the two.
That's fine.
Yeah. So I think point 5 does as well, and then I think point 7 is also a change. And the start of point 8. So I think that probably spells it out. Is that okay, good enough? Is that clear enough, Councillor White?
Thank you, yeah.
Thank you, okay. So we've got Councillor Hart as the mover, Councillor Costin as the seconder. Is it to be opposed? No, Councillor Hart as the mover.
Thanks, Mayor. First, I'd like to thank the holder of the current lease for the work they've done at an important facility, which is the Lake Colac Caravan Park. That lease is coming to an end in early next year, and if we are to continue to lease that out, we need to go through an EOI, expression of interest process. The key changes or the intent of the changes that I've done compared to the officer recommendation is to take account of the fact that we're doing two separate things here if this is approved. One is to invite the public to make submissions on whether we lease the property, and at the same time to invite expressions of interest for a possible lease. The reason I've put forward some changes in this resolution that's just been moved is we need to be open to the possibility that we respond in some way to submissions that may change the context of the lease or could, in theory, that we don't lease the property out. And so what I've sought to do is to make it clear that the public will have an opportunity to comment, that there'll be a submissions committee hearing if someone wants to speak to their submissions, and that whilst we are asking for expressions of interest, whether that proceeds further, whether that ultimately leads to a lease to any particular party, that that has to occur or can only occur after we've made a decision to respond to the submissions in a particular way. I think it needs, I don't have any problem with these things happening at the same time, but we can only proceed beyond the expression of interest and actually lease the property if we consider the submissions and still decide that it's appropriate to go ahead with the lease. So I'm not trying to stray dramatically from what was in the agenda, but just fine-tuning it if you like.
Thank you. Councillor Costin as a seconder.
Thank you, Mayor. Firstly, if I just thank the officers who are running this meeting. We're not making it easy for you, and I appreciate the work that's being done. Moving on to the motion, I'd like to thank the officers in preparing the AOI and the draft lease. This is a fantastic site for a caravan park on the shores of Lake Colac. It has great potential, and I'm particularly pleased that the officers have looked at the lessons we learnt from our EOI process, a leasing process for the forest campground. So I think we've got a fairly good document here. In the document, I'm particularly pleased to see that Council will consider longer-term lease proposals because that will encourage a higher quality or higher level of capital investments by the leasee because it removes the element of financial risk. It's very pleasing to see that if we do get some grant money for 5 key worker accommodation cabins, this will be included in the lease document also. And also very pleased to see the inclusion of green power, the requirement to use green power, which is in keeping with our council plan commitment to help our community and businesses to reduce overall greenhouse emissions. Thank you.
Thank you. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Mayor. Yeah, first of all, I'd like to thank Chris Hill, his wife and family and staff for the job they've done then over the last few years. Mayor, you might recall I was happy to roll over the lease for them for another 4 or 5 years. But we're here now, and that's life. And just wanted to thank them for the work they've done. And young Jack with his coffee cart has become a coffee icon in Colac, a great breeding place. I hope we end up with something similar. But I do too want to thank the officers. I think on the face of it, or so far, we've got a good result in the end with the Forest Caravan Park. And I'm hoping for a similar outcome for this location. The accommodation study that we did, we were looking for to attract 4 5-star accommodation in Colac, identified this site as the best site in Colac for some sort of motel, hotel, but the landowner, the state, won't entertain that sort of activity on this site. So we'll stick with the caravan park. I'm sure we'll get a very, very good result out of it all, and I look forward to seeing the result of the officers' work.
Thank you. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Okay. You've all unfrozen. Thank you. Thank you. Now we move to item 9.4, nomination of G21 pillar appointments. The purpose of this report is for Council to appoint councillors to the new G21 pillars. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor McCracken.
I was just saying, Mayor, I'm happy to move this, and given a discussion that we had prior, I'm happy for that motion to include the names of the different councillors that we've thought about putting in the different pillars.
Yep. Okay, thank you, Councillor McCracken. Are there any other questions from councillors? Councillor Hart.
While that's been typed up, I'm happy to second it and wonder if you might contemplate a short break after this item.
Yep, that is fine. Yep. Good idea. Okay, so we'll just wait for, so yeah, I've got the mover as in Councillor McCracken, seconded Councillor Hart. Okay, we're adding, yes, we're adding Councillor Chris Potter to the Culture and Economic Development, Councillor Margaret White to be Councillor Stephen Hart to Sustainability, and Councillor Graham Costin to Managing Growth Advisory Group. Okay, thank you. So if there's no further questions, Councillor McCracken, you're the mover.
Thanks, Kate. Thanks, Mayor. Look, I'll just be very quick. Obviously, there's been a restructure at G21, which is the whole reason why we are reconsidering what councillors are on what pillars, because the pillars have changed. So being one of the councillors who's not on one of the pillars, I'm more than happy to support my colleagues be on the different pillars that they wish to. So good luck, and I hope it is, you know, you can influence things for Colac Otway Shire, for the broader, you know, G21 region.
Thank you. Councillor Hart, you're the seconder.
I think Councillor McCracken covered it very well. Thank you.
Thank you. Does any other councillor wish to speak? No. Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Okay, councillors, we might have a short break before the next item. So shall we break until 5:30? That'll give you 12 minutes. Is that enough?
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. All right, councillors. Oh, I think we're back. Okay, now we've moved to item 9.5. I think everybody on my screen is frozen. Now we move to item 9.5, the proposed draft governance rules for public consultation. The purpose of this report is for Council to consider and establish governance rules that facilitate the continuation of electronic attendance and participation at Council meetings and delegated committee meetings. Do councillors...
You're frozen. I wondered if your camera's on. Your camera's on.
Mayor, Councillor Hart has his hand raised.
So does Councillor Potter. I wonder, Mayor, if you turned off your video, we might be able to hear you. I think someone's internet somewhere is playing up.
So how was that going? Sorry, I've just got some issues. I'll just
try there.
Thank you, Councillor Hart. Okay, sorry, I don't know what was going on there. Okay, the purpose of this report is for Council to consider and establish governance rules that facilitate the continuation of electronic attendance and participation at Council meetings and delegated committee meetings. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor Hart, you have your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. My question is probably more of councillors generally. I have some real concerns with the officer recommendation. I wonder if anyone else has a resolution that might have taken the rough edges off it, and if that's the case, might we be able to look at that, please?
Okay, Councillor Potter.
Thank you, Mayor. I have a question of officers, but in relation to Councillor Hart's question, can I frame there that I would like to move an alternative, which I think the officers might have wordings to, but it's not on the screen yet. It may take them some time to type it up. Shall I hold off my question there till the typing's done?
Sorry, move ahead and ask your question. I didn't unmute myself.
Oh, no, I just have a question for officers in relation to if the consideration of these points was put out for public consultation for 6 weeks other than 2 weeks, does that cause any legislative risk for councillors, or will it be acceptable?
I'll ask the Manager of Governance to respond to that.
For you, Mayor, thanks for the question, Councillor Potter. The legislative changes come into effect on the 2nd of September. Council will be non-compliant, however, it doesn't mean that the current governance rules that we have and operate under won't still apply. What it will mean is that Council cannot hold meetings either in a hybrid or a fully electronic medium until Council actually resolves the final governance rules. So that just basically means that meetings will have to be held in attendance.
Thank you. Are there any other questions, Councillor Hart?
Just on that last one, Mayor, and now that I can see the resolution that Councillor Potter's talking about, will that only be for meetings after 1st of September? I mean, if we're still in the environment that we're in at the moment, could there possibly be a meeting by electronic attendance in August? And secondly, I just want to clarify or get some assurance that if we vote for this resolution today, and I note the words in red, that isn't going to be interpreted by management that we've given the green light to the current wording, because I mean, as you know, I have some significant concerns.
So through you, Mayor, in response to your first question, Councillor Hart, there would be nothing stopping Council from holding an electronic meeting during the month of August because the changes don't come into effect. So those COVID omnibus regulations still actually apply until the 1st of September. In relation to your second point, I think we've articulated that in the motion that's actually being typed up now, that there is nothing. So this will be going out for public consultation. That doesn't stop councillors from making any further changes before final adoption at the September council meeting.
Thank you. Councillor White.
Thanks, Mayor. Just in relation to holding electronic meetings and the possibility of IT glitches that may mean a councillor may not be able to be seen, and 75.8 talks about that, and they're deemed not to be present. I'm wondering whether if I'm reading it correctly, point 76 actually addresses that with the cooperation of the meeting, we may modify the rules. So could that mean that if you're having problems being seen but you can be clearly heard, that with the agreement of the meeting, you could still be deemed to be present?
Through you, Mayor, thanks for the question, Councillor White. I think when we have this discussion at councillor briefing, we might give this a little bit further discussion. Some of the proposed draft governance rules that I have seen actually talk about where there are intermittent sort of glitches for 30 seconds, that doesn't mean that a councillor is deemed absent. So I think we could probably tease that out in further discussions if that's acceptable to councillors.
Thanks, that's good.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Okay, so Councillor Potter, your motion is up on the screen. Are you happy with that? So you're the mover of that?
Yes, Mayor, I would like to move that, please.
Okay, is there a seconder? Councillor McCracken, is it to be opposed? No? Okay, Councillor Potter is the mover.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Look, everyone's sick of blaming COVID, but COVID has changed the way councils have had to do business, including the way they conduct their meetings. There's some changes that were required by legislation to alter our governance rules, which we reviewed not a long time ago, but nevertheless, there are some changes we need to make. Some people may view these changes as minor in nature, but I think the changes have given rise to some issues and considerations that councillors haven't had a chance to discuss as a group, and I think it's prudent to have those discussions so we can tidy up any little misconceptions or things that we need to be fixed. Some of our neighbouring councils and councils further afield have all had to make the same sort of changes. They've gone out for public consultation for only 2 weeks. It's been a practice of this council since I've been here anyway, certainly in recent times, and I think championed by Councillor Hart, that we go out for consultation for 6 weeks. If this is supported, we can put these changes out for consultation for 6 weeks. In the meantime, have a group discussion that I feel, and I think most of us feel, we need to have just to understand what these changes mean, change the changes perhaps, so that we have a complete and full understanding about how we're going to run our meetings in the future, and to ensure that there is a proper and fair attendance of councillors as and when required. So I think putting them out now, it's, as Councillor Hart will point out, I'm sure, it's not an indication to the community that we're accepting these changes. We're putting them out now for the community to have a look at, on the understanding that we will be considering these changes in the next 6 weeks too, and may well come up with something different. But we need to give ourselves time to have that discussion. So, Mayor, I'm suggesting that we go to public consultation for 6 weeks, and I know staff will organise a discussion for us around those changes.
Thank you. Councillor McCracken as the seconder.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Look, I'll just be quick. I want to acknowledge the staff that have worked on this as well. It's been a big effort, and I think they deserve their acknowledgement because it is very important that this document gets out. And there has been some interest with this as well, and responding to questions and queries and whatnot is a big job in itself sometimes. So I think the staff need to be acknowledged for that. Also, I think it's a good idea to go out for 6 weeks because it also allows us to have a briefing session where we can talk about some of the issues that might have concerns from some councillors, or indeed maybe even some members of the community at some point in time. So happy for that to happen, and I look forward to the outcome.
Thank you, Councillor McCracken. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Hart.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Thanks, Councillor Potter, for moving this particular resolution. I am prepared to support it with a little bit of reluctance. The right of councillors to attend council meetings is a very important one. We do that on behalf of the community, and I have some significant concerns about the draft rules that were attached to the agenda. I think in the ideal world, we would have been discussing these potential rules back in April when we reviewed the governance rules just a few months ago. I acknowledge the point by Councillor Potter that COVID does seem to intervene in a lot of matters. Some of my concerns, I had at least 6 points that I was prepared to move today as resolutions to try to amend the document, but given the assurance that we can look at that in a briefing and have a discussion, which I hasten to add hasn't occurred to date. We have not had a briefing on this matter. And some of those are such that if a person returned a positive rapid antigen test, a RATS test, the mayor of the day would still have the discretion to refuse to allow that councillor to attend a meeting electronically. It's not pointing the finger at the current mayor, it's just a fact that how the rules are written. And I think that needs to be fixed. The other issue that one of many is that if your video's off, you're deemed to be absent. And you've been doing a great job today, Mayor, in difficult circumstances. I've seen councillors freeze and disappear, including you for a short time, Mayor. And I think the rules do need to be tidied up, the proposed rules, so that, and we have to ask ourselves, should you be able to disappear on the screen, but if you can still be heard properly, should that be that you are still in attendance? I think it should be. Otherwise, we would have minutes that reflect that probably all of us at different times in this meeting disappeared for 20 seconds or even a minute or so. So I think there's a lot of deficiencies in the rules as they're going out. Normally, I've taken the view that we put something out when we're more or less satisfied with it, and then alter it according to submissions if there are some. This is different. It's different because of the timelines that are approaching. And I'm not sure if that was me breaking up, Mayor, but I just make the point that I think it's different to this time. We haven't had time to discuss this, and we should be prepared to do alterations after we've had a briefing, whilst at the same time undergoing and inviting public consultation. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Now we move to item 9.6, the local government liability and commercial crime insurance renewal. The purpose of this report is for Council to renew Council's insurance policies for local government liability and commercial crime for 2022-2023. Do councillors have any questions of officers? No, Councillor Hart.
Thanks, Mayor. I may be straying into confidential issues, so I'll leave you and the CEO to work that out. But my question is, does Council have any claims history that might affect this particular premium, or, if you like, significantly affect this premium?
I might ask the CEO to respond to that question.
Yeah, through the Mayor. Thank you for your question, Councillor Hart, but I'll have to take that on notice. There's nothing that I am aware of, but I can't provide a definitive answer at this time.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? No. Okay, councillors, the officers have provided a recommendation with the report for our consideration. Does any councillor wish to move a motion? Councillor McCracken, you move the recommendation?
Yeah, I'm happy to move that. Thanks, Mayor.
Okay, is there a seconder? Councillor Potter, is it to be opposed? Councillor McCracken is the mover.
No, I'm fine, thanks.
Councillor Potter?
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. Can I just point out the cost of insurance to council? Everyone in the community, their insurance is going up. Sometimes we get queried about where our money goes. Well, you know, our insurance costs us well over $300,000.
Thank you. Does any other councillor wish to speak? No. Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? Okay, the item's carried 7-0. Okay, now we move to item 9.7, authorisation of officers under the Planning and Environment Act 1987. The purpose of this report is for Council to appoint Heath Chasemore, General Manager Infrastructure and Operations, and Russell Macho, Manager Healthy Environment, as authorised officers under section 147(4) of the Planning and Environment Act 1987. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor McCracken.
I say I'm happy to move this when you are ready, Mayor.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions? No. Okay, Councillor McCracken will move the motion that's on the screen. Is there a seconder? Councillor White. Is it to be opposed? Councillor McCracken is the mover.
No, fine, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor White?
No.
No.
Fine,
Does any other councillor wish to speak? No. Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0. Thank you. Now we move to item 9.8, revocation of authorised officer under the Planning and Environment Act 1987. The purpose of this report is to revoke the instrument of appointment and authorisation for Nicholas Benyon, who is no longer employed by Council. Do councillors have any questions of officers? Councillor McCracken?
Again, I'm prepared to do the same as I did for the last one. I'm happy to move it when you're ready.
Okay, are there any questions? No. Okay, is there a seconder? Councillor Potter, is it to be opposed? Okay, Councillor McCracken is the mover.
Fine, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. No. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item is carried 7-0. Okay, now we move to item 9.9, notice of motion, carbon emissions and offsets. Please note that at the 29th of June 2022 Council meeting, Council resolved that Council defer this matter for consideration and receives the Pagula report at the July 2022 Council meeting after officers have provided a summary paper of the carbon offsets options. A separate summary paper has been circulated to councillors. The notice of motion is unchanged for the 27th of June Council meeting agenda, and the purpose of the report is to consider Councillor Costin's notice of motion regarding carbon emissions and offsets. Okay, do councillors have any questions regarding this notice of motion? Councillor Costin.
Mayor, I'd like to amend this notice of motion to delete all items except point 4 and to slightly reword point 4 and ask for councillors' indulgence to do that. Thank you.
Okay. All right. We might just have to wait a few moments while that happens. So remove items 1, 2 and 3, 5 and 6.
Yes, and I have sent through a slightly reworded point 4, which is now point 1 showing there. So do we have that rewording?
I think so.
Thank you.
I think it's just taking its time. So while that's happening, Councillor Bell, you have a question?
Yeah, I'm just wondering if it could be emailed through to me, if that's all right.
Yeah, it can, but we also might read it out to you because it's not very long. So when
well, that's fine. Yeah, that's fine.
Councillor Costa could read it out.
I think I'm aware of what it is, but it'd just be good to have it at least read out.
Yeah,
thanks,
okay.
Thanks, Mayor.
Councillor McCracken, you have a question?
Yeah, I know I did raise this before, and I think, correct me wrong, Councillor Costin, but you might have been agreeable to it, is that if there's some part in it, perhaps at the end, which suggests that this could be done, you know, from the current allocated budget from 2020, 2021, that would be, or that as well, whatever the budget is.
Yes,
Thank you.
That has just been added.
Yeah,
Councillor, thank you. If you're satisfied with that motion, then if you could read it out, that would be good.
So the amendment takes out a number of those other points and rewords point 4, or what was point 4, to now say that Council undertakes to purchase 1,520 tonnes of appropriately accredited and certified brackets, i.e. Australian Government Climate Active Carbon Neutral Standard, closed brackets, offset units up to the amount of 26,000 to achieve Scope 1 and Scope 2 net zero greenhouse gas emissions for the financial year 2020-21.
Thank you, Councillor Costin. So Councillor Costin's the mover. Is it to be seconded? Councillor Hart, is it to be opposed? No. Okay, Councillor Hart, Councillor Costin is the mover.
Thank you, Mayor. The important thing in here is to underpin the integrity of any carbon neutral claim that we make. And I'm also would like to see some transparency in our decision here. So I thank officers for sending out the draft carbon offset options report to councillors last Friday. It seems our understanding of offsets has moved a long way since August 2020 when former Councillor Brian Cook put forward a requesting officers table a report detailing the range of options for offsets, including costs for the remaining residual emissions, and to detail how those offsets could be achieved. And that norm was carried 7-0, which was a great outcome, I thought, and thank you for the councillors who voted today. To my knowledge, a standalone report hasn't been tabled as yet, although there's been some discussion in briefings. and in some other council reports. So really what my alternate motion here is doing little more than setting a clear direction for councillors to purchase offsets which will underpin any claim we make for carbon neutrality, and to make it clear to our community what we're doing there. And the words I've put in there, appropriately accredited and certified, I've taken from an answer we gave to a question that came to our council meeting in March 2020, and we responded along those lines that we would purchase appropriately accredited and certified offsets. So I'm just following what the officers said we would do. It's important that we're transparent in this so that we don't have all sorts of questions raised in the future about our claim for carbon neutrality. We need to make sure that it's robust and that we aren't accused of greenwashing, and I think it sets a good basis for future years. In future years, we can look more widely at the offsets are available and what we can do in relation to something which is a bit more local and a bit more along the lines of what seemed to be emerging as the original council position, which was for revegetation offsets. But that was 2 years ago, and I think we've learned quite a bit along the way since then. So I'm simply proposing that we request the CEO to organise the purchase of these 151,520 tonnes appropriately certified offsets up to the amount of our budget, and I note that some of the certified offsets are actually cheaper than what we were looking at in the first place with offsets that have been proposed previously which are uncertified. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hart.
Mayor, and thanks, Councillor Costin, for the details on this resolution. I think it's an important part of the process that we agreed to enter into a year or so ago, namely that to become carbon neutral across our operations effective 1st of July 2020. This is now the other end of that, if you like. We now know how much we have to offset. Obviously, that's not entirely clear until you finish the year. We now know that figure. I think this suggestion that we get appropriately certified offsets is a sensible one, and I'm hopeful from the briefings that we've had on this issue that the budget will be more than sufficient to pay for those offsets for what we have to offset. And so I think it's a fairly straightforward resolution, but it's an important one, and it's important to show that we're taking this particular issue seriously.
Thank you. Does any other councillor wish to speak? Councillor Potter.
Yes, thanks, Mayor. First of all, I'd like to thank Councillor Costin for compromising in relation to this, and I'd like to point out that I too have compromised. I was happy with our original intention to buy Greenfleet offsets, although they didn't have the tick of approval or the certification. It was never demonstrated to me that there's anything wrong with them, and they were Australian based. However, there's a thinking that to really be not subject to ridicule, we need to have this certificate for our offsets. I think I've been very, very comfortable with what the Shire is doing in relation to carbon emissions and reduction of same. And like I said, I was happy with the Greenfleet option. However, Councillor Costin's compromised in relation to perhaps the budgetary expenditure, which would have been greater than we had budgeted for to buy Australian offsets, certified offsets. So we're buying overseas ones. I don't particularly like that either, but I know it's very important to some councillors and perhaps some people in the community that we have this certificate. So I will definitely be supporting this notice of motion.
Thank you. Does any other councillor wish to speak? No. Councillors, I'll now call for a vote. All those in favour? The item's carried 7-0.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Now we move to item 9.10, report of informal meetings of councillors. Please note that the purpose of this item is to report the informal meetings of councillors and does not require a council decision. So thank you, councillors. That concludes this council meeting of the Colac Otway Shire. It hasn't been a particularly easy one. There's been a few bugs and glitches. So thanks to everyone, thanks to the people watching and the staff who have had to tune in. And I declare this meeting closed.
Thank you, Mayor.
Thanks, Mayor. It's some difficult IT.